Welcome to another episode of Assess That with Tom and Nat.
And happy Monday, everyone. We hope that you had a great weekend and a great summer and that you're all ready for the week ahead.
Now, we know some of you are still on summer break. Some of you are back to work this week. And some of you have been back at work for a while, but regardless, we are ready to jump back into it and we're happy to be back.
Absolutely. We've actually had a great summer so far. It's been beautiful here in Vancouver. We still have a few weeks to go. And we know that summer doesn't officially end until September 22nd, but we all know that summer truly ends in education the second you go back to work.
Right. I mean, one of the interesting things about the world that we're in now is that there really is no hard end or beginning to the seasons in terms of summer and the flow of work and all of that.
Yeah, totally. We sort of just work all summer, truly. We don't have this we're on break now.
Mm-hmm.
But we do take some time off, like we did for Assess That.
Yeah.
Just a different flow.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, let's talk a little bit about what's gone on so far this summer. We did a lot of fun things. We did some work. So I want to ask you, what is the most enjoyable thing or your favorite thing we did? Let's start with the fun side.
The fun side
of the ledger. What's the thing that we did this summer that you thought was the most fun or way more funner?
Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this. Natalie, 5 years ago, would die to hear me say this.
Say it.
Camping.
Excellent.
You knew
Excellent.
Well, let's be honest. We glamp. It's not, well.
Okay.
Not that. Okay, go ahead.
Enough with the it's not camping, it's glamping. Invite me to the awards ceremony when people give out the awards for who roughed it the most. We drag our trailer and we are absolutely comfortable and happy with it. If you want to sleep on the ground and sleep in a tent and hike your way up a mountain and bring your can opener and eat your pork and beans, go for it.
You heard him.
We love our trailer. Rant over. Okay. Back to camping, Natalie.
Okay.
What do you love most about camping?
Oh, I think especially being right in the heart of downtown like we are, just being completely immersed in nature, waking up and it's just grass and trees and mountains literally all around you, staying up at night by the bonfire and you have campfire, I guess. It's not a bonfire, but you have all the stars in the sky. It just feels like this total soul reset. You feel connected to something bigger than you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, perhaps it's the fact that we also went to the Okanagan to camp, which is where I grew up. So there's something kind of always that feels like a little bit of my soul home.
Right.
So that's probably it. The connection to nature and something bigger than you.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too. We don't camp as much as we were hoping to. We got rained out on the May long weekend. But, Fintry Provincial Park, great spot, steps from the lake. We had some nice long days there. And I think that's the thing I love about camping is you get these long days, these days that stretch out all the way into the evening, the campfire, the snacks, the music and playing games. I played a lot of Farkle. And
Farkle queen over here.
You are the Farkle queen. Yahtzee, other games, so it was a lot of fun. So we really enjoyed it. What about work? What's the most fun we had with work this summer?
Oh, man. I feel like so many things. You know what? This.
Where we are.
Where we are right now. If you're listening, you might just hear the audio quality, but we actually decided to level up our podcast game, get it off the kitchen counter, and go to a professional studio. So we're sitting in this beautiful space in Yaletown in Vancouver. It's inspiring. It just makes it feel like this isn't just our little hobby anymore because this has been our full-time job for a while. But going to a space where it's okay, today's a podcasting day is really exciting.
Taking it seriously. Shout out to Yaletown Studios, podcast studios here in Yaletown. They absolutely have a fabulous setup. We don't get paid to say that, so we're just saying that.
They're just wonderful.
But it's a wonderful place to come. I would say yes, and something else that I think was really fun this summer that we saw a lot of things work-wise happen. I mean, our book was published in May, which was very cool. And in our other business, we started tinkering with meta ads, and I thought that was a very cool, fun thing that you had more to do with than I had to do with.
Throughout my neck,
right? You back in the laboratory trying to figure that out. But we've had a great summer so far. We know we've got a couple of weeks to go until Labor Day. We know once Labor Day hits, everybody's back to work. But it's been a great summer so far. So no matter where you are, we hope you've had an enjoyable summer, or we hope you squeeze a little bit of fun out of the next few weeks when you go back to work.
Okay. A quick reminder of the PD events this fall. On September 22nd to 23rd, Tom's going to be doing his Grading from the Inside Out 2-day workshop in Atlanta, Georgia. On October 22nd to 23rd, Tom is going to be doing a Grading from the Inside Out 2-day workshop in San Diego, California. On October 23rd to 24th, so yes, there's a bit of an overlap, I will be doing the Grading from the Inside Out 2-day workshop in Spokane, Washington. So choose the north or southwest coast, I guess. On December 2nd to 3rd, Tom's going to be doing actually the standards-based learning in action 2-day workshop in Austin, Texas. So there's links in the show notes for all of those events.
Right. A big welcome back to returning listeners and a big welcome to any new listeners joining us for the first time. We, of course, really appreciate all of you.
Yeah. In this back to school episode, we are going to explore how your earliest assessment moves set the tone for the entire school year. From the first task you assign to the way that you give feedback, students are picking up messages about what matters in your classroom.
Right. So we're going to explore how to design an assessment culture from day one that builds trust, supports learning, and reflects our values.
So that's today's plan. Let's get to it.
All right. So we are kind of calling this episode First Impressions, Lasting Impact, Designing Your Assessment Culture from Day One. You know, every year we spend hours on our seating charts. We spend hours on the design of our syllabus, our classroom setup. But how much thought do we actually give to what our assessment moves say to our students on day one?
Absolutely. Because those first assessments, the first time that we give feedback, the first time we reveal our grading policy, all of those send such a loud message. And if we're not really intentional about it, if we're just doing what everyone else does, we might be sending a message that we don't actually wholeheartedly agree with.
Right. These things that we do with assessment very early on, you know, they really do shape a classroom's culture. They shape kind of the impression that students are going to have for the remainder of the year. You know, there's things that we do that we need to really think about and rechange. There's a lot of common missteps that I think teachers can make inadvertently or sometimes intentionally if we have certain mindsets. And we think that there are better moves to be made as we move forward. So from day one, we want to make sure that people understand that first day, that first assessment matters a lot more than you think it does. Yeah. And it is going to have a lot of impact on our students.
Absolutely. So let's start at the very beginning of what you just described, Tom. So those first assessment experiences that we give to our students and how they can completely set the tone about what we value in our classroom. Because really, assessment isn't just a way to extract knowledge. It's not just a way to gauge knowledge. It actually reveals our priorities. I feel like, I can't remember who said this, but it's such a clever way of saying it. And everyone's going to remember this forever now. We evaluate what we value. And so what you first put in front of students is going to go a long way to show your values. Now, listen, as we say this, we know some of you, like myself, I was in this situation, might not be able to actually have a say in some of the district-wide or school-based assessments that are mandated of you that you have to put in kids as soon as they walk in the door. We get that. We understand. And that might be very frustrating if it's something that really doesn't align with the values of your learning in your space. However, the one that you create and you put in front of kids and you describe is the one that we have the most control over. So that's what we're really talking about right now.
Yeah. I mean, kids on those first assessments, they're going to think to themselves, like, was I supposed to be perfect the first time? You know, do I get the chance to revise in this class? Is there a chance to do continual learning? Or is it just a one-shot deal? Is the teacher's focus more on sorting me or supporting me? All of these early messages. I remember hearing Tom Guskey say years ago, this has got to be 20 years ago, that I first heard Tom talk about this. And I thought it was one of the best pieces of advice you could give a teacher at the beginning of a school year. And that is, when it comes to the very first assessment that the students have, over-prepare them for that first assessment. Not give the answers away, but over-prepare them to the point where a successful result is inevitable. That jolt to their system, you know, suddenly they get I'm just going to use numbers for effect. Instead of a poor result, they get a 17 out of 20 on that math assessment, when maybe under normal circumstances, they might have got a 12. That shock to the system, it's like, oh, maybe I actually do know some math. the messages we send, I like that we evaluate what we value. The phrase that I've often used is what adults give their attention to is what kids think is important.
Right.
So as we give our attention, where we put our attention in assessment matters a ton. So we have to recognize as classroom teachers and even as principals, you have to recognize that assessment is culture setting. How you handle assessment, how you handle my learning sets the tone or sets the culture for the school.
Yep.
There's so many hidden messages that come with how we assess, the use of zeros, the way we use the red pen. I know a lot of people have moved away from that, as if using a purple pen makes the sting out of these biting comments, right? But I think what we have to recognize is that in almost every aspect of life and society, we often say first impressions are lasting impressions.
Yes.
So how you introduce students to your assessment systems at the beginning of the year, it might stick the rest of the semester or the rest of the
100%.
school year, and you are now trying to dig them out of that hole.
I have to call something out here. Maybe call in to those who are doing it, because I think the intentions are always good. And there's something that I've witnessed and that I've experienced called the CBM, the Curriculum Baseline Measurement.
Okay.
And so how a lot of teachers understand this is I'm going to give them a test about all of the major content that we're going to be covering this year, and then reveal to them how much they don't know so that I can then show them how much I have filled their empty vessel. People.
What are we doing here?
We got to stop. I've actually sat in so many coaching sessions where teachers will try to defend till they're blue in the face how this builds student confidence. And I'm like, when's the last time you showed up to a new space where someone didn't know you?
Yeah.
They basically told you all the ways you suck, and then you wanted to continue going to that space. Ergo, my Pilates experience. We talked about this many times.
Yes.
The first time I went, I ended up getting one of the worst instructors for my first time, and she was like a very vocal corrector. So she'd on the mic be like, Natalie, bend your knees. Natalie, do this. Natalie, do that. No. To the point I swore at her. I'm not proud of it, but I was like, I told her to F off. Because I was like, I know. Thank you. Like, it's not helpful. This is not helping me. What I need is like, girl, you put on those tights. You put those on. Good for you. You showed up today. Like, that's what I needed. So if we are going to do this kind of a baseline measurement, I think starting from a place of, I want to uncover your strengths. I want to see all of the things that you're bringing into the space. Ask more open-ended, more performance-based types of questions. So there's lots of variability for kids to show you what they know. For instance, we used to do like a literacy kind of a baseline assessment. Super open-ended. It was choice and voice. They could choose. Do you want to look at a comic? Do you want to listen to a podcast? So there was just so much variability because we would learn so much about the kids, about what they were drawn to, what things they were taking away, how they like to show their knowledge. And we would just be able to celebrate that, show this tone of we're here as a culture of readers and writers to grow together. There's so much brilliance already in the space. Here's the evidence that I just saw.
Yeah.
How cool is this? And I also, we've got some things that we're going to learn and grow on and just get better because we're already so great.
It is.
That's a totally different tone.
Totally different tone. And you do set the tone early in the school year. It's interesting that, I remember it would take me a little bit of time, especially if you taught multiple classes. It would take you a little bit of time to learn the students' names. But within the first week of school, we're already hammering them in the grade book. We don't even know their names yet, and yet we're locking it down in the grade book. And that
you are a 42.
You are.
I'm Jeff.
That's right. That's right. And that very first grade, I don't know if you've heard this expression before, but that first grade that the students receive can almost feel like a tattoo.
Yeah.
Like it can feel like it's permanent, and it sets a tone, and it sets not just a tone in terms of what the student thinks about their own learning, but it can actually set the first impression for how the teacher views the student in terms of the result as well, right? So that part is something we need to think about. What do the messages early on say? And so aligning our early assessments, this really gets us into going a little bit further, aligning those early assessments, you mentioned it earlier, with our values, right? Thinking about, what do I believe about student learning? And then do my grades actually reflect that? That's a good question to ask ourselves, right? So a lot of teachers will say that growth matters, but they grade the first quiz, or the first assessment like it's actually a final exam.
Yeah.
Like it's locked down, never to be removed. When, I often ask teachers in workshops, when's the last time you actually removed something from the grade book because it was no longer relevant to where the student was in their learning, or zero weighted or no counted it in the grade book, right? So we have to put our money where our mouths are. If we value risk-taking, if we value resiliency, if we value improvement, and students start to show that, we've got to really have our grading practices and our assessment practices kind of match that.
Yeah, I feel like this is the quiet part that I'm just going to say out loud. If you are going to do some kind of a diagnostic, like that's fine. There's nothing wrong with gathering some information to start making decisions.
Right.
Just don't grade it.
Right.
Don't grade it.
Yeah.
We have to really question, like, why do we really need this data at this point? And we could say, well, it's data in comparison and we can see where kids are in relation to other kids. But if we really want to say that we value each individual student, we value their learning journey, why do we care so much about just comparing them to each other right out of the gate? Like that's something to really sit with and be like, is this really it? Yeah. Is this really what I'm looking for?
I think this is a really important point to reemphasize with what you said, or to double tap as the expression goes. Because everything you described there about diagnostic assessments is formative, which has little to do with the summative purpose, which is where grading sits. Yeah. So yes, do diagnostic assessments. Yes, think about where kids are in relation to standards, but let's not do this norming and comparison. And let's not grade that to the point where now it's, I'm going to grade you on stuff you don't know yet because I haven't taught it to you yet. And now your grade is sort of at a disadvantage.
I think there is an important middle ground here to point out as well, that there's a great place in this diagnostic conversation for a more process-oriented rubric, or as we like to call it, a task-neutral rubric. So that means looking at your area of study and saying, what are the bigger overarching skills or competencies that I really want to get at this year? So you're not really looking at something in minute detail. Like, I'm going to look at your ability to write a paragraph. You're going to say, I'm going to look at who you are as a writer. Like, you just want to go a little bit higher than thinking about the individual task. So when I talked about that performance-based literacy assessment that we used to do, we had a more process-oriented reading rubric and a process-oriented writing rubric. And what we'd actually do with the kids is we'd encourage them to, with us, look at the evidence. We'd determine, where do you think you are on this trajectory, like on this progression? Okay, let's talk about a goal that we can set for this first term. And we'd also share it with parents in our very first interviews. And we'd say, by next term, so now we're green, next term you're going to see a color that's pink, and we're going to be really focused on this goal, see what we learn in that area, how things adjust, and let them know, like, it's not going to be linear. Sometimes things are going to shift and adjust, but this is kind of a snapshot of where we're at right now. We've got some goals set. This is what we're working towards. But really training kids right away to look at evidence and start to match it to the bigger skill or process that they're going to be seeing throughout the entire year, which creates this exponential growth trajectory, which is something that's backed up by research. I'm not just saying this.
No, for sure. All of that is just a much more useful exercise than just this clinical application of assessment practices. And it starts to send a very different message to the students, right? It starts to send a different message about engagement, involvement, and understanding where they are. We get it. Look, it's really easy to fall into the trap of, I got to get some marks in the grade book. Sometimes you get that pressure from principals.
Sometimes, yeah.
And sometimes there's policies in place. So people don't want to be insubordinate. They don't want to not follow their responsibility in their job. But it is, even if there isn't policy in place, it's really easy to fall into that trap, that idea that if I don't grade it, it's not important or it's not significant. And sometimes, there's this pressure to record something and always get something in the grade book, because that's what society has told us matters.
Absolutely. Preach. And it's funny, because even if the principal hasn't said it to you, I've been in so many scenarios, like even as a teacher, where we have this internalized, they're going to fire me if I don't have a million things in the grade book. I don't know what it is about it's like a thing, it's like a ticker tape for parents, right? So we feel like if we don't populate it with things, we look like we're not doing a good job. And then we just start to find things to grade for the sake of grading. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed to admit this, but we used to always use the first couple weeks as like the coloring maps weeks. Grades would be through the roof. Parents were thrilled. But like, that's not what we're talking about here. Don't just fluff the grade book with whatever basic task that actually has nothing to do with the cognitive rigor
Right.
of your standards or outcomes. And also really just question, like, is this really a policy or is this just something I made up? Is there someone I can check with? Is there something I can read?
Oh, you have no idea how many times people do that. They make up policies that don't exist. I remember working in central office and I'd have principals call me and they'd say, well, it's a board policy that this happened, or it's a board. And I'm like, where is it a board policy? Where have you read this? Well, it's a policy. It's not a policy. It might have been practice. It might have been a norm, but it's actually not policy, right? And I mean, I think we have on the net done ourselves a disservice with the electronic grade books and the open access. And I think we've talked about this many times on this podcast before, but ultimately by giving parents too much access, and let's be clear, this is not about keeping secrets from parents, but by giving them too much access to things they don't know how to interpret or don't understand how to interpret, just giving them the raw numbers like it's the stock market, like it's and they're looking for every blip on the stock market. There's going to be a lot of misunderstandings. And when stuff doesn't go in the grade book, they think it's being dismissed or it doesn't matter. So we've got to try to resist this idea that everything needs to be quantified, everything needs to be put into the grade book. A lot of things kids do as far as serving learning is not necessarily needing to be put into the grade book.
Gotcha. So it's really important here. We're just going to emphasize now that we design early tasks that build trust and confidence.
Right.
That we say, I'm not here to catch mistakes. I am here just to see you, to build a relationship with you, and to build some unstoppable momentum for the rest of the year. And so the more that we lead heavily on this formative purpose and not the summative purpose of which grading is a part of, we'll actually get into that space with kids. So any opportunity where they get to reflect on themselves, they get to explain and show their thinking, they get to talk to peers about who they are as a learner, what their goals are, what they're hoping to get out of this year. I know this is a lot of like what I already know, what I'm hoping to know, like a lot of that type of stuff is really, really I actually had a mentor early on, shout out to Leighton Schnellert. If you know, you know, but he gave us this one pager that was like getting to know me. And he told us like, this is non-negotiable. I'm giving this to all of you because this is a non-negotiable in your first week of school. And I want you to do something with it. I want kids to talk to each other about it. I want you to read it and respond to it.
Right.
And it's going to be more important than anything else you do this first week. And that always stuck with me. I was like, right, that's the evidence that matters. That's what I should be really responding to and helping kids respond to. It's not data.
You know, this confidence piece, I mean, again, listeners, if you know, this is something that you and I talk a lot about, the importance of confidence and the role that confidence plays in students being successful and seeing themselves as learners. Confidence is not arrogance. Confidence is not fluffy. Confidence is what Rosabeth Moss-Kanter calls grounded optimism. And I love the way she says that. This is the key to student engagement, right? We often talk about classroom climate, like this is the climate of your classroom.
It is.
This is why we talk about assessment being the engine, because it really sets the tone for everything. Because you can have great relationships on the periphery. Hey, how was your weekend? I heard you went away or you had a soccer tournament or things like that. That's all well and good. And then the minute the chips are down, the minute I need longer to learn, how you handle that says everything to me about what truly matters to you. We talk about values, right? So this is the climate, right? The early assessments for students is often this opportunity. It's your connection, or what some might say is your handshake to students. Like, we're in this together. I've got you. And we're going to create a climate here of learning and a culture that really sort of moves in the direction of you always being able to continually improve.
Tom, I think it'd be really helpful here for you to list some of the grading traps as you've kind of coined them through some of your recent work. But what are those initial grading traps that, regardless of best intentions, people tend to fall into because they just haven't thought about it?
The grading traps often center around things that ultimately lead to distortion, one being the zero trap, one being the late penalty trap. And listeners, as a bit of a preview, in our next episode, we're going to zero in on, no pun intended, we're going to zero in on grading specifically, about how to shift paradigms around that. But the grading traps themselves are things that we get trapped into. And the reason we call it, or I call it, the grading trap is because it's no one teacher's fault. We have a system and a momentum behind a lot of these grading practices that we quite frankly have to shift, but it's very challenging for one person to shift them because there's so much expectation around how grades function, what the purpose of grades are, and all of that. So the zero trap would be one of them for sure. Trying to wrongly teach responsibility through the grade book, the late penalty trap, the arguments about the real world and all of those different things. Those kind of trap us into like those behavioral elements being included into grades. So we get trapped into that because there's either school policies or there's district policies or there's just norms in the community or the school community that expect grades to function a certain way. Parents think that way, students think that way, principals think that way, and sometimes our colleagues think that way as well. They think this is the purpose of grades and that's how it's supposed to function. So that part is critical, right? Averaging is another grading trap, right? That we fall into, that averaging old and new evidence, especially within the same learning. All of these things are well-intentioned. So I trust this. This is the hardest part, I think, for some people to keep in mind or understand about the work that we do, is we trust teachers. When teachers use practices that we find unfavorable, we don't view them as bad people. We might disagree with the practice. So when someone says to me, well, I believe in zeros, I don't agree with them. I think it's a distortion and I think it's a wrong practice. But I also believe that that person is implementing them for the right reason. They believe that that is in the best interest of the students they're working with. Are there maybe people out there who do things maliciously? Maybe. I don't know. I can't point to them. What I can say is that there are people who believe it's in the best interest. I can disagree with them, but I believe that that they are coming at it from the right perspective. Now, they do have some short-term results at times, but Natalie, they can create some long-term problems.
Absolutely. To avoid these grading traps, we want to be crystal clear in this episode that what we want to do when we start our school year with any grade level of learners is to set up a feedback-first culture. That the number one reason we are gathering evidence is to learn more about ourselves and learn more about where to go next. So this really centers the idea of learning over just compliance, over learning over grades. Let's be totally honest. The grade is going to come, the communication will come, but it's that dialogue between teacher and student, between student and student, and then between student and self that we want to have front and center very quickly. So something we highly recommend to people to show that this is so important is to get to a situation where you can have kids in a very scaffolded way talking to each other right away. First day they're in your room. How do you get them scaffolded safely talking to each other? And there's lots of like layers of, okay, what kinds of questions do we ask? What's safe? Because I've heard critiques of like, well, if you ask everyone talk about how great your summer was, you're kind of putting some kids at a deficit if they didn't have a good summer, if something horrible happened. Now I have to tell this stranger about my parents' divorce. Like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, that might not be safe. But you could have them do a fun game where it's like we used to do this handshake challenge where we'd have some of the senior leaders record different funny handshakes and they'd have to each move around the room and find a new person. So it was very structured. It was very like we are controlling the interactions just so you get a chance to meet all these different people and just have that first exposure. So very structured, but constantly talking to each other. The next is you got to find a way to sit one-on-one with every single one of those kids. So there's clever ways to get around this using technology. For instance, we do a week-long kind of a flex learning thing where there's this different tiered, almost gamified way that they could learn about their executive functions and what are their strengths in executive functioning, what are their areas of growth, how do they go deeper with that, how do they set up, and it was really fun and playful and there was great videos and stuff. But the goal of that it was cool to learn about executive functioning, awesome. But the actual goal was to be able to sit with each kid one-on-one and start to talk to them about who they are as a learner. Now, this was middle school, so we had the benefit of having some of that homeroom type of time to do it. But you could set up any type of like, what's a one-off, 1 week, big picture overview to some big concept in your discipline that you want kids to learn a bit about, but the actual outcome is you getting to talk to them about that concept, about what they're learning, about what their hopes are, about what their fears are. And they immediately go like, oh, that's a different tone, right? That's like, I individually am seen, I matter, and I have a relationship with the teacher. You want every kid to feel that way. And if we do a lot of these kind of more old school data collecting diagnostic type of assessments, it's I'm a number, I'm being calculated, I'm a cog in the machine. Very different narratives that those present.
No, absolutely. You have to think of it as more of a dialogue than a judgment. And that feedback loop really zeroes in on learning. We can't create a culture of learning when everything is about judgment or everything is about compliance. Because if our first few grades in our grade book are really just about, did they do it? Did they get it done? Don't be surprised if later on in the school year, kids start to believe that that's what matters, is just getting her done as opposed to deepening their learning. So if students get to like week 2 or week 3 in the school year and we haven't used any feedback with them, we're completely losing the plot around where we need to be with assessment. So we can, I think a lot of teachers get overwhelmed. I think you have a great session on feedback that really, really resonates with folks. You did it earlier this summer in Wisconsin at the conference.
Perfect 5 out of 5
5.0 on that session.
Not that it's about grades and points and scores, but
and this speaks to some systems and routine. So what are maybe for you some of the ways that teachers can mitigate the time issue by creating some structures or systems or routines? People might say, Natalie, I get it. Tom, I get it. I should be using more feedback, but I'm totally overwhelmed. Where am I going to find the time? What are some things they can do to try to mitigate that perceived issue or real issue that they might have?
I love this question so much because most of it is just understanding what the research is actually telling us, which leads to a mindset shift, which actually tells us to do less.
Right.
I love when the research says, hey, you're doing too much, do less.
You're doing too much. Yeah, that's right.
So basically, when we think of feedback, most of us see it through the lens of task. I have to give feedback on how to improve this task. We end up writing these beautiful, color-coded, diary entries to the kids. Takes up our entire Sunday. Our friends are out for mimosas. Nope, we got stacks of essays and our flare pens. This is how we've been kind of just conditioned to understand feedback works. The truth is, kids don't read it. Most of it goes over their head if they do, and very few will act upon it. So why are we doing it?
Right.
So where do we have to be
it's
okay,
performative almost.
Stop. Again, it goes back to just lots of grades for the purpose of grades, lots of feedback for the purpose. Look at me, I'm working hard. I gather my worth by working. That's a whole different conversation. So we have to stop that. Okay. And then we have to realize the research is actually saying the feedback that will most move learners forward, that will most transform them from where they're at to where we want them to go is to cause thinking.
Right.
We just have to ask more questions.
Yeah.
It's that simple. We have to stop writing and giving and directing so much and actually just ask questions that make the kids think a little bit. Because even if they think and it's not exactly where we would have landed them, they've still taken a step forward. And it's better than them looking at that page of flare pen notes going, ooh, and throwing it away because they don't like the score on top anyways.
Right, exactly. So listeners, you've heard us say this before, is my feedback a set of directions or does my feedback cause thinking? It's a good question to ask yourself as you look at how you provide feedback. We want to make sure that revision becomes a natural part of learning. It isn't this special thing. It isn't this thing that just, we finally had the opportunity to revise. Revision and continual learning is a part of the learning process. This is how people learn. Adults, children, teenagers, we all learn through this continual process. So we want to align ourselves. If we are about learning, and I know a lot of people say, well, I'm about learning. If you truly are about learning and kids reaching outcomes and reaching standards, and we know that some students need longer to learn, providing that feedback is the way that you raise achievement. That's almost unanimous in academia that you raise achievement that way. So to recap the big message here in this episode as we finish up, your early assessment decisions are going to mirror what you value.
So if a student only saw your first 3 assessments, what would they believe about your classroom?
Right. That would be an interesting question to ask. But we want to encourage you as don't feel overwhelmed by this. When you think, look ahead. If you haven't started the school year yet, think about what your first 3 assessments are. Look at that little window and ask yourself, what message does that send to my students? And if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now, just our favorite expression, think big, start small, be very thoughtful, and through your assessment, do prioritize building trust.
Because how we start shapes how students will see themselves all year long.
Okay, that's it for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Assess That.
And don't forget to follow Assess That on Twitter or X or Instagram. We've got links in the show notes for both of those.
If you have any specific topics for us that you'd like us to cover, you can DM either of us on any of the platforms that we are on.
And a reminder to check the show notes for links for all of those upcoming professional learning events.
Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, as that helps grow the podcast reach.
And finally, if you like what you're hearing, please keep spreading the word about the podcast to your friends, your colleagues, or on social media. We really appreciate that.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, everyone.